Welcome, everybody, to the early tea time live stream presented by Fantasy Points. I am Hunter. I'm here to walk you through the Wells Fargo Championship here today. First, before we do that, let's go ahead and break down the Mexico Open from last week. Jon Rahm won with a score of minus 17 under par. He was 30 to 40% owned in DraftKings, which, I've been really doing a lot of reflection on last week because I had a lot of lineups that were in contention at the beginning of the week and then kind of faded a little bit. So been thinking about that a lot. Like I said, he was 30 to 40% owned on DraftKings. I love PGA DFS because your strategy really needs to change all the time, in my opinion. If you fade that 30 to 40%, obviously that can be very advantageous. But if you did that, you're obviously not having a winning week when Jon Rahm wins at that kind of ownership. So that's why I love this game again, because you really do need to change your strategy each week if you're trying to be successful week in and week out. Yes, you can, again, fade that. It'll probably work 5 out of 10 times. You'll probably have a great advantage with that. But for those of us that are trying to again grind this out week to week, it's really fun to go in on all in on Rahm again when he's that high owned, and sometimes it'll pay out. So looking at just some of the top lineups, I played the 20 entry max, the $3 contest. The winning score for that was 633 and a half. The lineup for that was Jon Rahm, again 38% in that contest. Cameron Champ was 10% owned. Davis Riley was 7.7% owned. Nate Lashley was 9.3. Kurt Kitayama was 3, and then Bird was not even a percent owned. So definitely a contrarian lineup, especially with Bird and Lashley in there, Kitayama as well. So you definitely need to be contrarian when you are playing 30 to 40% owned guys in DraftKings. That's why I think it's really important to know what contests you are entering. If you're playing one like this one that had 35,000 entrants in it, you're definitely going to need to play some very contrarian and unique guys if you're going to play a lot of Jon Rahm, like a Bird, like a Davis Riley under 10%. Everyone else in that lineup was under 10% owned. And I really need to do better at kind of finding some of those squeamish guys like a Bird, for example. And that's why you play those 20 entry max, of course, because you can get a little bit different without having to risk too much there. So again, Jon Rahm victorious at the Mexico Open. Tony Fino gave him a little bit of a run, but he never really was in contention. Kitayama as well. I really watched Cameron Champ sink it away there with that triple bogey on the back nine. That definitely hurt my feelings just watching through the scores. But I will move on now to the Wells Fargo Championship here. It's going to be played at TPC Podomac in Maryland. It has a population of 46,000. It's located just outside of Washington, D.C. It has, again, this event is traditionally played at Quail Hollow, so make sure that you're doing the right research this week. It is played at TPC Podomac. So it's a little bit different course. Quail Hollow is 74,000 yards. It's a par 71 track. It hosted the 2017 PGA Championship that was won by Justin Thomas. And it's also, again, being moved this year due to the President's Cup being played at Quail Hollow later this year. So we'll move to TPC Podomac at Avenell Farms. It's a par 71, 7,100-yard track. Again, very different. So make sure that you're doing the right research this week. Make sure you're listening to the right touts, I guess. Make sure they have the correct course that we're talking about here. Again, TPC Podomac, Podomac. I think I'm saying that right. So we haven't really seen this course too often. It hasn't been seen in 4 years, actually. It hosted 21 total PGA events in its 36 years, but again, we haven't seen it in 4 years. We'll talk about last year really quick, though. Quail Hollow, again, Rory McIlroy was victorious here. He was dominant in rounds 2 through 4 after a pretty lackluster opening round where he shot 1 over par. He shot a 71 in that opening round. He got really hot with the putter, though, throughout the event. He ranked 3rd in the field in strokes gained putting. He also placed in the top 10 in strokes gained approach and tee to green. He just was really dominant. I believe Quail Hollow is a Tom Fazio designed course, so he plays well on those kind of courses. I wish we could kind of get him again here at Quail Hollow or I guess I wish we could play Quail Hollow for this event, but it is going to be nice to see a little bit of a change here. Going through the rest of the top 10 results, Abe Ancer finished second. He is back again this year. Keith Mitchell finished tied for third, as well as Victor Hovland, who was the highest owned golfer from last year. Gary Woodland finished fifth. That's where he started to really turn it around last year. That's where he, at least one of his bright spots from last season. He didn't have the greatest 21 season by his standards, but that was one of his better finishes. Patrick Reed, Matt Wallace, Luke List all tied for sixth with a score of 5 under par. Bryson DeChambeau and Aaron Wise finished T9 with -4 under par. So again, we can't really go off of that too much because it is at a different golf course, but it's good to know, I guess, who plays well in this area of the country. Again, this is played in Maryland. I believe Quail Hollow is in North Carolina, so not too far away, but it is a little bit of a change as far as where they're playing at. So McIlroy is the only player to ever won multiple Wells Fargo championship events over the years. He also won in 2015 and in 2010. But again, all of his wins were on Quail Hollow. So he is the favorite this week. He's also going to be the highest, I don't want to say the highest owned golfer. He's the highest priced golfer in DraftKings. We'll see what the field does with him. He's, I think, almost $1,000 more expensive, than Tony Fino, who is the second highest owned there. So we'll see what the field does with Rory. Last 10 winners of this event include Rory in 2021. Like I was saying, there was no event due to the pandemic in 2020. Max Homa was victorious in 2019, Jason Day in 2018, Brian Harmon won in 2017, and then we go James Hahn, Rory McIlroy, JB Holmes, Derek Ernst, and Ricky Fowler in 2012, who's getting some buzz this week. I'm not a big Ricky guy. I have to see him contend before I even consider putting money on him, but he does fit some of the stats that we'll be looking at here a little bit later. I'll talk about him a little bit later, like I was saying. So, again, this is the first time that we'll see TPC Podomac since 2018. We saw them play the Quicken Loans National event there. So it was a little bit different back then. They've adjusted just a few of the bunkers. They've actually played this course quite a bit, like I was saying before, a total of 26 professional events. They've had some renditions or renovations to the course over the last few years, especially in 2006 and 2008, where they adjusted a lot of the holes. They changed some of the par fives to be a par 3 and a par 4, just splitting up some of the fairways a little bit. So it's definitely a different course than what it played in the early 2000s. Back in the early 2000s, actually, Adam Scott won the Booz Allen Classic in 2004. He edged out Charles Howell III and the rest of the field by 4 strokes there. Charles Howell has actually finished runner-up here twice. We'll look at some of the recent events at some of these older events in a little bit. Rory Sabatini won the same event in 2003. He shot 14 under par and won by 4 strokes as well. But again, this is a much different course than some of these older players had seen back then, again in 2003 and 2004. Some other events that have been played at the TPC Podomac, the Mid-Atlantic Championship in 2013, that was a web.com event, as well as the Neediest Kids Championship. That was a web.com event in 2012 as well. There's also been a Champions event in 2010. That's when Mark O'Mara won with a score of -7. That was the Constellation Energy Senior Players Championship. So they've definitely seen a lot of different PGA Tour events here. Again, the Booz Allen Classic, that took place in 2003, 2004, 2006. The Kemper Insurance Open, that took place from 98 to 2002. So a lot of different events have been played here. This will be the first time, though, that we see the Wells Fargo Championship. All right, well, let me take a drink here quick. Again, 21 total PGA Tour events in 36 years here. The 2017 and 2018 Quicken Loans National will be most of the data that I pulled from this week. You'll probably see that the same from other content creators. You'll likely see a lot of the data, again, coming from those 2 events just a few years ago. Other PGA Tour events, again, the Booz Allen Classic, the FBR Capital Open, Kemper Insurance Open, TPC Podomac also hosted those web.com events. in the early 2010s there. So lots of data that we could go off of, but I'm specifically looking at those two Quicken Loan events because those were after the renovations to the course, not only in 2006 and to 2008, but also they've just given random renovations to the course, such as changing some of the bunkers, adjusting some of the tee boxes, of course. So we always want to look at the most recent events when we are doing that. So let's look at those two Quicken Loan events here first. In 2017, Kyle Stanley won with incredible ball striking. He gained over 5 strokes off the tee as well as on approach. The results from 2017 go Kyle Stanley in first, Charles Howell the third and second, Ricky Fowler and Martin Laird tied for third. Keegan Bradley, Sung Kang, Mark Leishman, Spencer Levin, David Lingmerth, Curtis Luck, Ben Martin, and Johnson Wagner all tied for fifth there. That's quite the cluster when it comes to fifth place. But as far as players who are playing in this event, no Kyle Stanley this week. We do have Charles Howell the third, CH3. Ricky Fowler is teaming it up. Martin Laird, Keegan Bradley, Sung Kang, Mark Leishman, Ben Martin, and Johnson Wagner, who is a great putter on bent grass. Keegan Bradley, yeah, and Kyle Stanley. They just kind of show here that you don't have to be a great putter to win. We typically, obviously, you need to putt to win, of course, but they just show that strong tee degree play can kind of hide some of those putting blemishes. They definitely aren't, well-known putters by any means. The average green size at TPC Podomac is below tour average. Golfers also 3-putt over 10% below the tour average too. So again, you don't have to be a great putter to do well here. We obviously want to tie it in a little bit, especially on those bent grass greens. But again, if Kyle Stanley is winning a PGA Tour event, it just shows you don't have to be an amazing bent grass putter to contend here. 2018 was kind of dominated by Francisco Molinari. He won this thing with a score of minus 21. The next closest was Ryan Armour, who finished second at minus 13. Sung Kang, again, he finished third this year. I'll talk about that here in a second. Tiger Woods teed it up in 2018. He finished fourth with Abraham Answer. Bronson Burgoon and Bo Hostler finished T6. Hostler is teeing up this week as well. He's a great golfer who avoids a lot of mistakes. He's also a pretty good bent grass putter too. And then tied for eighth, we got Brian Gay, Chesson Hadley, Andrew Landry, and Ryan Palmer. So if you look at this list here, there's definitely a lot of accurate hitters. Molinari and Armour, they're definitely two of the more accurate hitters off the tee. Abraham Answer, of course, Brian Gay, Andrew Landry. Again, those are all really accurate hitters off the tee. I also said Sung Kang's name twice. He had a third and a T5 in those 2 years. So he is teeing it up this week. He hasn't been playing great. He had a decent finish last week at the Mexico Open. So that's something that we can, kind of go off of. But I don't think I'm going to be hammering Sung Kang by any means. I think his odds are in the hundreds, of course, 125 to 1. It might be a little bit higher than that if you can look around a little bit. So Sung Kang might be a decent value option this week. I don't think I'm going to get there quite yet. We'll look at what his ownership is. So, all right. So, again, the course played much more difficult in 2017 compared to 2018. The winning score in 2017 was -7. In 2018, it was -21. Molinari just really dominated the field. He actually won a major just a few weeks later. So it makes sense why he got to that score. But the cut line was also much higher in 2017. It was +5, where it was +2 in 2018. So I don't know if the course just played that much more difficult in 2017. It'll be interesting to see how firm the greens are this week. I would assume that probably plays a big part of it, but the rough is really, really long. So we'll see how that impacts things. I'll talk about that here in a second. So I'm going to share my screen here now. And pulled it up. Perfect. Thank you. So first off, I like showing these tournament fact sheets just because this is exactly where I pull my data from. I'm not making some of this stuff up. You can find this on the GCSAA website. If you just Google this and tournament fact sheet, you can find this yourself. So this is definitely not magical information that we're finding. You just need to do some Googling from time to time. I'll zoom in on this just a little bit so you can see it on the stream. Looks like we are good here. So again, some of the key stats, let me rearrange this here. It is a par 70. The distance is going to be 7,160 yards. The green surface are going to be bent grass. So we'll look at some of the best putters on that surface here in a little bit. The green speeds are going to be 12.5 on the stimp meter, so that's much faster than average. It's also going to be the fastest that we've seen since the Masters at Augusta. There are 7 lakes that put water hazards on 10 of the holes here, so we definitely want to have some accurate hitters. We'll be looking at the best drivers off the tee when it comes to accuracy and good drives gained here in a little bit. There are 81 sand bunkers, so we'll maybe look at a little bit of sand save, but I think sand save is one of those stats that you need to be considering what you are betting on. If you want an outright winner, you probably don't need to look at that too much, because if your guys are hitting in the sand, they're probably not going to be winning anyways. Whereas a very cheap value play in DFS that's just kind of making the cut and having a solid weekend, you probably want to weigh in some sand save a little bit. So again, just kind of weigh what you are looking for within your golfers, whether it's a long shot DFS play or an outright winner, of course. So the rough length is going to be 3 inches long, and I'll scroll down a little bit on this so you can see that. It is going to be Kentucky bluegrass, which is kind of like a carpet-like grass. You see that in most of these courses. It is pretty thick, and again, 3 inches long. That is really, really long. Some of the longest that we've seen in weeks now. Augusta was really short. The Zurich wasn't anything penalizing. Harbor Town is known for pretty short rough, and the Mexico Open, I don't think that was too difficult as well. So this is going to be a bit of a change for what we've been seeing in the past. You have to be accurate off the tee, and you'll hear that all week long. You've got to have accurate drivers. If you, again, hit your ball into the rough, you're basically giving up a birdie opportunity. You're going to have to use those wedges to hack it out there, and the chances of hitting on the green are much, much lower, of course, when you are hitting it into this long rough. Since it is a par 70 course, we do have to sacrifice 2 par 5s this week instead of just 1. We'll still have those 4 par 3s. However, we will see 12 par 4s, which is quite a bit. So we do need to weigh in par 4 scoring, of course. The birdie holes on this course are holes 2, 10, 13, and 14. They're birdied about 20 to 30% of the time, and 14 is birdied 40% of the time. So definitely need to score birdie on those holes. 2 of those are the par 5s, of course. So got to have birdies on those holes. Otherwise, you're basically giving up a shot to the field. The most difficult holes are 3, 4, 11, and 18. They are bogeyed about 20% of the time. Hole 11 is the most at about 28%. This is definitely not a birdie fest by any means. It has some of the lowest greens in regulation percentage, some of the lowest driving accuracy. It's the most important course in terms of driving accuracy, So you definitely need to have some accurate drivers. Again, it's no birdie fest. Again, I know Molinari shot 21 under that one year, but I would assume that's quite an outlier. If you look at a lot of those other PGA Tour events, they're usually in the mid-teens to even -7 when Kyle Stanley won just a year before that. So I don't think we're going to see anything too crazy like in the 20s by any means. We'll see, though. Someone can always get hot on the greens, of course. So golfers will only see 2 par 5s each round. Both par 5s are on the longer side. They measure 591 yards and 641 yards. So, laying up is probably going to be what most guys do here, especially since some of those shorter hitters will be doing well here, of course. Half of the 12, so the 12 par 4s, half of them measure 450 to 500 yards. So that means about a third of all of the holes are par 4s from 450 to 500 yards. So we'll definitely look at that here in a little bit. So those are the course notes that I have, everything that I have on the course. Again, it is a little bit different this week, and especially the last couple of weeks too, with the new course at the Mexico Open. This course being kind of used every now and then, every few years. It's been a little bit of a difficult process finding data on some of this stuff, but we will prevail, of course. I don't have to use Google Translate this week, so that was kind of nice. As always, if you have any questions, if you're watching on YouTube, you can throw them in the chat. I will pull them up in the comments here. If you have any questions on key stats to look at, course specs, of course, we'll look at ownership and weather, as well as just kind of running through the field a little bit here in a second. But again, if you have any questions like that, throw them in the comments. I would love to go through some of this stuff. All right, and I wrote all this in my write-up, and that's free on Fantasy Points. Again, you can see that on my Twitter. Some of the key stats that I think are important this week, and these are kind of a broader stat. I'll talk about it in a second, but go to Pat James' article on Fantasy Points. I'm not sure if it's posted yet. If not, it'll come out tonight or tomorrow. He does a great job of breaking down some of the more specific stats. For example, my first stat that I'll talk about is, strokes gained off the tee. But if you want something a little more specific, we can look at, good drives gained, of course, and I can pull it up in my stats. But I really want to pump up that article because I think he does a great job of just explaining some of the more detailed stats instead of, shots gains approach or strokes gained around the green. We'll look at scrambling, that kind of stuff too. So definitely pull up that article if you are a PGA sub. And if you're not, use that code Vaness22, the promo code Vaness22 to get a 10% discount on the PGA package at Fantasy Points. So all right, let's get into these stats here. So strokes gained off the tee, that's going to be the first stat that I will look at. Placing your ball in the fairway is going to be the most optimal way to get birdies here. Again, if you hit it into this 3-inch rough, I know I for sure would be hitting it. I'd probably be getting snowmen all over the place on this course. But, if you hit into the rough, you're basically giving up your birdie opportunities. It's just so hard to hit out of this long rough. We'll see how guys do, I guess. But again, there's lots of quotes out there that just say how crucial it is to put your ball in the fairway. So last week, I think I made the mistake of not looking at off the tee stats, and I looked just at, driving distance, and I still want off the tee because, on the contrary this week, of course, I want accuracy, but I still want guys that have that little advantage of hitting it, a little bit longer. So I want those two combined together. I want the guys who are accurate, of course, but I also want those guys that can hit it a little bit farther. So top 5 players in strokes gained off the tee in the last 24 rounds are going to be Cameron Young, Brendan Steele, Keith Mitchell, Sergio Garcia, and Cory Connors. Those will be some names that you hear probably all week long, especially Cameron Young, especially Cory Connors, and Keith Mitchell is also getting some buzz early too. So Sergio Garcia, he kind of fits that build of great ball striker, but can't really putt. So he might be worth a look as well. But those are the best players off the tee, again, in the last 24 rounds. Looking at approach, a majority of approach shots at TPC Podomac come from 150 to 200 yards or more. In the 2018 Quicken Loans event, 20% of approach shots came from 150 to 175. 21% came from 175 to 200. So you can't just focus on those short but accurate hitters. You're definitely going to need guys who can use those long irons. And I think I said long irons probably 10 times last show, but it ended up being really important. I mean, look who won the event. John Rahm. Look who came second. Kurt Kitayama. He's really good with the long irons. Cam Champ was in contention for a majority of the time. Tony Fino is pretty solid from that range as well. So same thing. You'll probably see some of the same names that were popular last week within this stat. Satoshi Kodaira, I think I had him in this section last time too. Vaughn Taylor, who withdrew in the second round of last week. So be careful with him this week. I'm sure he'll be pretty cheap, of course, but he's definitely a WD concern. Adam Svenson, who I could probably talk about for quite a while. I have had high hopes for him this season, and he just cannot seem to putt. He ranks so well in these approach numbers. He's a really good ball striker, but he makes way too many mistakes, and he just cannot putt right now. So going to have to take a break from Svenson. If it burns me, I'm finally over the fact of if he does well, I'll be okay. I'll be fine. Our Happy Barn Rat, that is Dom's guy, who started off terrible last week, but man, he really came back throughout the weekend and finished pretty well. So he ranks 4th in strokes gained approach from 150 to 200 yards again in the last 24 rounds. And fifth place here in this category is Ricky Fowler, who finally pops in a model a little bit. So we'll see how Ricky does this week. He's just been not able to putt recently, but he has been striking the ball pretty well. He's kind of like in that Gary Woodland category for me just a few months ago, where I really needed to see him, go out there and prove it before I put a lot of money on him. And Woodland's finished pretty well. I was kind of disappointed last week, but I think he is turning it around. I do think Woodland will win a PGA Tour event this season. I'm pretty confident in that. Next up, greens in regulation, the percentage here is pretty low compared to the PGA Tour average. So we need to target guys who are still good scramblers and who can, save par when they miss these greens. The greens are also pretty small too. So regardless of how good you are with the irons, just even a slight miss might get that ball to roll off a little bit on these smaller greens. So there's a lot of quotes out there on how guys honestly just aim for the center of the green most times instead of aiming for specific places of the greens, because there's a lot of undulations and, hills, I guess, or mounds throughout the greens. So if you aim in the middle, it's probably not going to run off. Whereas if you drill that pin, yeah, you might put it within, 5-10 feet some of the time, but the odds of, again, that ball running off the green are much higher. So we need guys who are solid scramblers. Again, guys who can save par for us when they aren't as sharp with their irons. Top 5 players in strokes gained around the green last 24 rounds are Matt Kuchar, Matt Jones, Rory McIlroy, Matthias Schwab, and William McGirt. I also put on the bent grass greens feature for the around the green stat, just to see who's the best on bent grass greens, again, when it comes to scrambling and just around the green in general. That's going to be Wesley Bryan, Seamus Power, Webb Simpson, Joel Dahman, Camilo Vegas, and Harry Higgs. I think I butchered his name there for a bit. But that's what I got, again, for the top scramblers and best around the green players on bent grass greens. 6 of the 18 holes are par 4s that measure 450 to 500 yards. These are the golfers that are the top of the class when looking at those holes. First off, let's look at par 4 scoring, actually. So top players at par 4 scoring are going to be Brian Harman, Cameron Young, Cory Connors, Matt Fitzpatrick, Gary Woodland. We have McIlroy in the top 10. Keith Mitchell comes at 8th. Sergio Garcia is 9th there. So, again, there's going to be 12 par 4s. We definitely need to consider who is the best on that type of hole. 6 of the 18 holes, again, are 450 to 500 yards, again, that are par 4s. These are golfers that are the best in that range. So this is going to be Gary Woodland this time, Tyler Duncan, Cameron Young once again, Brian Stewart, and then tied for 5th here is KH Lee and Seamus Power. KH Lee is going to go back to Byron Nelson, next week to, I think that's next week, to defend his championship there at another TPC course. And again, this is another TPC course, so TPC KH Lee, could be in consideration here. I did not get his DraftKings price. We'll have to check that out here in a second. As I was saying before, this course is one of the more difficult courses that players will see all year long. In 2017, only 25 players finished the event under par. So we definitely need to kind of flip the switch a little bit and look at bogey avoidance rather than birdies gained or opportunities gained. I know, of course, that's going to be important. You have to score birdies to win. But again, when we're looking at like $6,000 golfers on DraftKings that, we're just trying to get to make the cut, who we don't really need to win the event. Yes, that would be nice, of course, but that's why I think it's important to tie this kind of stat in depending on what you're trying to do, right? If you're looking for those value guys, look at sand saves, look at bogeys avoided, look at those mistakes that you can look to avoid there. Whereas, again, if you're looking for outrights, of course, you're going to want to look at birdies gained and who's the best scorers, of course, right? So just kind of consider what you are looking for. Top 5 players in bogeys avoided last 24 rounds are Matt Fitzpatrick, Gary Woodland, Rory McIlroy, Beau Hossler, and Sergio Garcia. Last stat we'll take a look at here is strokes gained putting on bent grass greens. So instead of around the green, we're looking at putting this time. It's a Stimpmeter of 12.5. It's also the fastest that we've seen since Augusta. So a little bit different than that sticky paspalum from last week at the Mexico Open. It's going to be probably pretty firm and fast. So a little bit of a switch up. We'll look at the top 10 players when putting on this surface now. First is Mackenzie Hughes. He usually ranks at the top of the field when it comes to putting stats. Bo Hostler, is going to be number 2. He has a decent course history here as well. I think he finished 6th in 2018 it was. Pat Perez is number 3, Johnson Wagner number 4, Abraham Answer 5, Andrew Putnam 6, Rory McIlroy, Zach Johnson number 8, Patrick Reed number 9, and 10th is Webb Simpson. So some guys to consider, especially when we're looking at bent grass putters. Again, these are just a few of the stats that I'm looking at. Check out that stat model, from Pat James for a more in-depth breakdown of all the stats to consider this week. All right, let's do a little searching here. So first off, I want to look at the weather for this weekend. And we'll take a look at some ownership as well. Again, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat here. We are getting close to the end of the show. We'll start to take a look at some of the betting favorites, of course, before we wrap things up. The weather this weekend is looking like it's going to be pretty cold. Thursday and Friday, 71, 67 are the highs and temps. There is a chance of rain on Friday. Looks like it's more potentially in the afternoon than in the morning, but we'll kind of see where that shakes out as we get closer to Friday, of course. Saturday, there is a chance of rain as well. Looks like that's just going to be in the morning. It should taper off towards the middle of the day. So hopefully there's no delays this week, but you never know what'll happen. Again, it's going to be cold. High of 57 on Saturday, high of 60 on Sunday. Should be pretty nice out on Sunday as far as, rain, for example. The wind is projected to be 5 to 10 miles an hour all week long. So we shouldn't have to factor that in too much, in my opinion. So yeah, weather, again, it's going to look pretty cold. Chance of rain on Friday and Saturday. Hopefully there's no delays. We'll have to check back on Wednesday. Look at the PGA Fantasy Points Discord. We'll always be looking at the weather there if there are potential, tee time stacks, for example. All right, let's look at ownership now, and then we'll look at the favorites for this week. So highest or most popular plays as of now. Of course, this can change as we get closer to Wednesday, of course. Right now, it's going to be Cory Connors coming in as the highest price option. He is coming in at $10,100. I would definitely expect him to stay up at the top there. He kind of ranks near the top at a lot of the stats that I'll be looking at. Cameron Young is going to be the chalk pick of the week, especially for the value plays. It's going to be really enticing to play both of those just because it fits out. Again, Cory Connors and Cameron Young, but you just need to, one, consider what contests are you playing. If you are playing multi, MME type contests where there's thousands of entries, if you're playing both of those two together, you better have some really squeamish plays down below in the 6K range likely. You're probably going to need some guys under 1% to 2% if you're looking to win. And I think that's, again, what all of our goals are, especially when it comes to GPP. So, again, if you're going to play Cory Connors, if you're going to pair him up with Cameron Young, you've got to get different elsewhere. You cannot play, honestly, any of these other names. There's probably going to be better plays out there. I always tell myself there is always a lineup that is better than yours when I'm creating lineups. So how can I get different, or how can I be that lineup? And if you're playing these 5 guys that I list off here, it rarely ever does it actually work out that way. Matt Fitzpatrick is going to be third. All these guys are projected around 20% right now, but of course this can change and things can shake out as the week moves on. Russell Henley is going to be fourth. Sepp Straka at $7,600 is going to be the 5th highest owned, as well as Joel Dahman, same price, just about the same ownership as well. So there definitely is some ways to build a chalky cash lineup here, which I don't really play a whole lot of, but just the way this build's going to work out, you could start with Straka, Dahmen, Cameron Young, throw in Cory Connors, and still get some, decent, still have a lot of money left, which I assume most people are going to do this week, especially pairing again Cameron Young, Cory Connors together. And again, I could easily be wrong on this, but there's probably going to be a better play out there. Cory Connors could win, but is Cameron Young really going to finish second? Are they really going to go 1-2? Obviously, there's a chance for that, but I would likely take that 99.9% chance that it doesn't happen and look to fade one of those two in certain lineups. You can still play both of those. Try to switch them up a little bit. If you do play them together, find some of those Jonathan Bird type plays that I was talking about before, or Kitayama plays that are 3% owned that can win you the GPP. Do not be expecting to win if you're not playing some of those squeamish plays, of course. All right. Any questions on ownership? Again, you can throw that in the YouTube chat. I'm going to share my screen around this time. We're going to get up the odds on FanDuel this time. Just looking at the odds recently. I love comparing, again, of course, DraftKings and FanDuel together because, of course, they're competitors, but they're just so different sometimes. DraftKings last week, I thought kind of had the edge or gave us the edge when we're looking at some of these prices. I could be wrong. I haven't studied it a whole lot yet, but it does feel like FanDuel has a little bit better odds for us as customers this week. There's a lot of golfers in the like 15 to 30 to 1 range on DraftKings, and they kind of spread that out a little bit better here on FanDuel. So, of course, it's up to you where you put your money. I would always recommend looking around just to get the best odds possible, but you don't need to be creating like 10 different sportsbooks account just for a couple of points here or there. Obviously, everyone is different, but that's just how I look at it here. Okay, so again, McIlroy is going to be the top priced or the favorite. He is coming in at 7.5 to 1. Cory Connors here is 19 to 1. That's a little bit better than his 16 to 1 price on DraftKings. Tony Fino comes in third at 21 to 1. Matt Fitzpatrick at 21 as well. Abe Answer at 28. Hatton at 31. Russell Henley at 32. Keegan Bradley at 34. And Seamus Power at 34 as well. So a couple of guys that I wrote up in my article. I haven't quite decided, which way I'm going to take yet. I call these targets because a lot of my DFS lineups aren't created again till like Wednesday night at 7 or 8 o'clock. So again, a lot of that has to do with ownership. I'm going to play all three of these guys, but we'll see like how heavy, I guess. Again, it just kind of depends on ownership and how everything shakes out. But I do like these three so far. First off is going to be Cory Connors. If I pull up my mixed condition model on Fantasy National, Cory Connors ranks at the top of this model. He ranks 5th in strokes gained off the tee, 4th in good drives gained. He is 10th in bogeys avoided, 3rd in strokes gained par 4, and then 4th in strokes gained ball striking overall. He's also 12th in par 4 scoring in that range of 450 to 500 yards. I really don't like the price on Cory Connors. Even 19 to 1 doesn't really get me very excited. Yes, Cory Connors is good, but I don't think he's necessarily at that level yet. I know this is a weaker field, but we'll see. He could easily prove me wrong on that, but I do like Cory Connors as a DFS play. I know he's going to be one of the highest price or the highest owned options, but a lot of the times if those guys that are 10,000 or more, it actually pays off more often than not. Of course, if you look at John Rahm last week, that's just a minor example, but when it comes to expensive chalk, you really don't get screwed too many times, of course. Now, it all depends what you do after that and how that expensive chalk works out. But Cory Connors, I'll be sprinkling him in. I'll probably be above the field when it comes to DFS for him. I just think he's a great play. I'm not going to ignore the guy who's at the top of my model just because he is high owned on DraftKings. I will find ways to get different elsewhere. Okay, so the next guy in my model is Martin Laird. That's because I kind of gave a major boost to good drives gained. If I bump that down, he falls just a little bit, but I really do think accuracy is going to be important here. He's not one of the three that I wrote up, but again, one of those guys that ranks near the top. And I'll kind of run through my model here next. But he ranks first in good drives gained. He is 14th in ball striking. He's ninth in par four scoring in that range that I was talking about too. So at $7,100, I do think, or on DraftKings, excuse me, I do think he's a decent value play. You'll definitely have to get different if you are pairing him up with Cory Connors. I think he's starting to gain steam just with people talking about him so far already. The rest of my model goes CT Pan, actually, which, again, he's one of those climbers when I bumped up the good drives gain and the accuracy, of course, but he is one of those that didn't look great in round 3 and 4 of last week. But he started off really well. He and Charles Howell, actually, they're both in my main lineup, and they shot better in round 1 than they did all of rounds 2, 3, and 4. So definitely a little bit of a letdown as the week went on. So again, CT Pan ranks third. Fitzpatrick is fourth. McIlroy is fifth. So that definitely makes sense there. Cameron Young is sixth. Vaughn Taylor ranks high here, again, due to his great proximity numbers from long range, as well as his really good driving off the tee. But again, he had that WD in the middle of the second round. I don't even think he teed off, actually. So not going to be playing Vaughn Taylor this week. I will let other people take that chance. Gary Woodland ranks 8th. He did really well in my model last week, but probably didn't, you know, live up to the standard, I guess, that I have, or the expectations. Keith Mitchell, which makes sense. He's a great driver of the ball. He ranks well in off the tee as well as good drives gained. So he's probably going to be in a lot of models or popping in a lot of those this week. And then Brian Harman ranks 10th because he is an accurate hitter. He's really good on par fours, and he's a good ball striker too. He's been hitting the ball really well recently. At $7,700, I think he will go slightly under the radar. Again, with those chalky guys at 7.6 and Cam Young at 8,000, I do think there are ways to pivot around those guys and get a little bit different. So yeah, those are my favorite plays. I talked about Cory Connors. I guess a couple other that I had. Again, in my write-up, of course, Tony Fino. Talked about him in my Sunday round 4 bets too. He had the most Tony Finau weekend ever, where he shot terribly not terribly, he just couldn't putt really on Thursday and Friday, and then had just an immaculate weekend on the greens. He had great tee to green stats all week long, but Tony Finau, I do like him this week as well. He ranks pretty well throughout some of the stats that I was looking at. Let me find him here. So 7th in strokes gained approach. He's first in proximity from 150 to 175. He's really good with those long irons. He's a great ball striker. If he can putt just anything close to how he did on Saturday and Sunday, there's no reason why he can't be in contention once again this week. Again, more of a DFS play for me than an outright bet. I think he's going to be a good pivot off of a chalky Cory Connors, and I'm assuming is going to gain steam in ownership, Rory McIlroy. So I do think he's going to be a nice pivot there. And then Seamus Power really rates well here as well. Let's pull him up here too. He's 14th in strokes gained putting on bentgrass. He's a great bentgrass putter. His around the green game is what has been kind of keeping him around over these last few weeks. He did have that string of 3 missed cuts in the California swing, but he performed well at the Masters. He did well at the Players, which were 2 very difficult courses, and that's what we'll see this week. There used to be the narrative on him that he only played well at the Birdie Fest, those easy courses that have a bunch of Korn Ferry Tour players that aren't very difficult. But he proved that wrong, playing well at Augusta. He played well in the match play too, I believe, and then he played well at the Players Championship too. So we'll see what he looks like this week. I do think he's a good value at 8,300 on DraftKings. Let's look at his betting number, 34 to 1, I think it was, right? So there's so many guys in this range here. This 30, 20 to 30 to 40 range. I know Jers was betting or talking about it on Twitter. I don't think it's a bad idea to go with some long shots this week. I know this is a difficult course, but if you look at some guys who potentially are great ball strikers who put the ball in the fairway. Don't have to be a great putter. You might find some bombs or some long shots that could be in contention this week. So as far as my betting picks go, I'll be tweeting that out likely Wednesday night. That's kind of when I put everything together. I will put my cheat sheet out on Wednesday too, so you know exactly who I'm playing and who I am targeting in GPPs, and I'll give some notes, talk about some Thrive fantasy stuff as well. So if you have any questions, you can hit me up on Twitter at Huntman10. I would love to, communicate with you, of course, or just help you out in any way possible. Don't forget to sign up for that PGA package at Fantasy Points. And I hope you all have a great week. I hope you win some money this week. It's going to be interesting to see this, not new course, but new course for this event, I guess. So we'll see how it ends up. So again, good luck, everybody. Let me know if I can help you out. Reach out to me on Twitter at Huntman10 and have a great rest of your night.